I sit in the corner of the nursing home's recreation room, my eyes fixed on the whiteboard near the entrance. It is where the staff writes down the names of residents expecting visitors each week. The letters are neat, written in blue marker. Mr. Johnson, daughter at 2 p.m. Mrs. Ramirez, grandchildren, Friday afternoon. Mr. Clark, son on Sunday. Then, there is the space under my name. Eleanor White. Blank. Every week, I hope to see something different, and every week, the line under my name remains empty. That afternoon, as I sat clutching my cup of weak tea, Nurse Kelly walked by. She glanced at the board, then at me. Her lips parted in a small sigh before she forced a smile. "Mrs. White," she said gently, "no one has signed up to visit you this month." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. I nodded, as if I had expected it all along, and gave her a brittle smile. But inside, I felt something squeeze my chest so tightly I could hardly breathe. The tea in my cup trembled against the porcelain. I held it with both hands, as though the warmth could keep me from collapsing. The room around me hummed with noises. The shuffle of walkers, the clink of domino tiles, the buzz of the television tuned to a daytime show no one was watching. Yet in that moment, all I heard was the silence left by my absent family. Later, as the nurses thought I was dozing, I heard two of them whispering near the counter. "I still don't understand," one murmured. "Her son lives only 30 minutes away." The other chuckled dryly. "You didn't hear? Daniel told the front desk last winter. Don't call me anymore. She has nothing left to give." The words sliced through me like a blade. Nothing left to give. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I pressed my fingers into the armrest of the chair until my knuckles whitened. The blood drained from my face. My heart pounded so hard, it rattled against my ribs. I wanted to stand up, to demand they repeat it, but my legs wouldn't obey. Instead, I sat frozen, my ears ringing, my mind racing back through every sacrifice, every dollar I had earned and handed over to Daniel. I remembered nights at the sewing machine, working until my fingers bled just to pay his tuition. I remembered covering his credit card debt when he was only 25, telling myself, he just needs a chance to start over. I remembered the day I gave him the deed to my house, trusting his promise that, "It's only temporary, Mom." And now, he had dismissed me with a single sentence. The fluorescent light above me buzzed, casting its harsh glow over the empty table where no one had left flowers, no one had set down a card. My chest tightened until I thought I might choke. Kelly passed by again and touched my shoulder. "Are you all right, Mrs. Dirty and Bia White?" I forced a smile. "Of course, dear." But my voice cracked, betraying me. When she walked away, I stared again at the whiteboard. My name sat there, naked, abandoned. For years, I had told myself, Daniel and my daughter Rebecca were simply busy work, family, obligations. I invented excuses for them, little shields to protect myself from the truth. But tonight, the shields shattered. It wasn't busyness. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was rejection. Deliberate. Cold. The sound of laughter drifted from the hallway. Another family had arrived. 3 children ran to embrace their grandmother, their voices filling the air with joy. I turned my head, pretending not to watch, but the sight blurred my eyes. A drop of tea slipped down my trembling fingers. I set the cup down quickly before it shattered. My body ached. Not from arthritis, not from age, but from something deeper. A wound that no medicine could touch. That night, alone in my narrow bed, I replayed the words again and again. "Don't call me anymore. She has nothing left to give." My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. My hands clutched the thin blanket as though it might anchor me. It was then, for the very first time, that I understood. My family's absence was not an accident. It was a choice. A refusal. A betrayal written not on paper, but on the blank space under my name. My name is Eleanor White. I am 76 years old. The sound that haunts me most is not the beeping of hospital monitors or the squeak of wheelchairs in the hallway. It is the sound of a summing machine pedal creaking under my foot. Even now, when the night is too quiet in this nursing home, I sometimes swear I hear it. The steady thump thump, whir thump thump. That rhythm carried me through decades of sacrifice. It was the heartbeat of my youth, the song of my survival, and the lullaby that raised my children. The memory begins in a cramped kitchen in our old house. The wallpaper had peeled from the corners. The stove gave off more smoke than heat, and in the far corner stood my black Singer sewing machine. Its paint was chipped, its wheel rusted, but it was faithful. For over 40 years, I bent my back over that machine, my eyes straining under a bare bulb, my foot pressing that pedal until my ankle burned. I worked 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. Wedding dresses, school uniforms, cheap suits from men who never paid on time. Anything, everything. Each dollar stitched was a brick in the fragile foundation of my children's future. I remember the winter of 1989. Daniel was 9 years old, Rebecca was 7. The heating bill that December came to $85. 47 dollars. I still remember the number because I kept the receipt folded in a plastic bag to protect it from snow. My fingers were numb as I held that slip, wondering if we could afford both heat and food. That same week, Daniel's teacher sent a note home. Field trip fee, 12. I stared at that paper as if it were a court summons. $12 meant skipping eggs for the week. But I couldn't bear the thought of him being left behind while his classmates went. So I stitched late into the night, my foot pumping until dawn. The machine creaked, and the needle bit through fabric, again and again. That was how I bought Daniel's happiness, for $12 and bleeding fingers. As the years passed, the numbers grew larger. Rebecca's college tuition, $1,200 every semester. Daniel's car loan when he was 22, $5,800. Rebecca's wedding gown, silk and lace, I stitched for 3 months straight. She cried with joy when she wore it. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I'll never forget this." I smiled, though my wrists ached so badly I could hardly lift the scissors. I charged her nothing, of course. A mother does not put a price on her daughter's dream. And then there was Daniel's credit card debt. He came to me pale and desperate, tossing envelopes across my kitchen table. "They're going to ruin my credit, Mom. Please, just help me this once." The balance was over 3,000. I had only 1,500 in savings then, but I borrowed the rest against my sewing work. I told myself, "It's fine. He'll pay me back." He never did. The machine kept creaking. Thump, thump, whir. It was my constant companion, my jailer, and my salvation. I sometimes fell asleep on the stool, my head bent over the fabric, dreaming of numbers. Tuition, rent, debt, always debt. And when I awoke, the cycle continued. I told myself, "It will be worth it. They will understand one day. They will love me more for this." But here is the thought that gnaws at me in the silence of this nursing home. Did I teach them to love me, or only to take from me? Sometimes I replay Rebecca's words at her wedding. "I'll never forget this." Yet years later, when she moved 2 states away, her calls dwindled. Birthdays were forgotten. The last time she visited, she glanced at the old machine in the corner of my apartment and wrinkled her nose. "Mom, why do you still keep that junk? It smells like dust and bleach." She didn't see it as the altar of her childhood. To her, it was only clutter. Daniel, though, his foreshadowing came earlier, sharper. He grew tall, his voice deep, but his words often carried a careless edge. Once, when he was 26, he slid a stack of papers across the table. "Just sign this, Mom. It's a power of attorney. Nothing serious, just in case something happens." I frowned. Why would I need to sign that now? He forced a laugh, scratching his head. It's just a precaution. You know, better safe than sorry. Tobin. The pages were thick, covered in legal print I didn't understand. My heart pounded as I held the pen. For a moment, I almost signed. But the sewing machine creaked behind me, reminding me of every night I had fought to protect what little we had. I pushed the papers back. Not now, Daniel. I'll think about it. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Still, I saw the flicker in his eyes, the flicker of someone who wanted more than I could give. Years later, after I moved into the nursing home, Daniel came again with similar papers. He stood by the window, tapping his pen impatiently. Mom, just sign. It makes everything easier. Bills, insurance, all that boring stuff. I'll handle it for you. I shook my head. I still handle my own affairs, Daniel. He rolled his eyes, muttering, for now. Those two words echoed in my mind long after he left. Looking back, I see the pattern as clear as the stitch lines on a wedding dress. Every sacrifice I made, every dollar, every hour, was a thread in a tapestry of dependence. I thought I was weaving security for my children, but perhaps I was weaving a cage for myself. Each seam tighter, each stitch binding me to their needs. The creak of the sewing machine was not just the sound of labor, it was the sound of chains. Sometimes, when the lights in the nursing home dim at night, I whisper into the dark, did I fail them, or did I fail myself? I gave them everything. Heat in the winter, education, freedom from debt, even beauty on their wedding day. And yet, what did I teach them? That love is measured in money? That a mother's worth is in what she can give, not who she is. The question burns me more than any hunger ever did. Now, as I sit alone in this sterile room, I picture the old Singer machine back in storage. Rust spreading across its wheel, dust covering the pedal. No one will ever know how many nights I pressed that pedal, how many dreams were bought by its ceaseless creak. And when I remember Daniel's voice, just sign, Mom, just for convenience, I shiver. It was never just convenience. It was the beginning of erasure. I wonder if I should have known then, if I should have seen what was coming. But I didn't. I chose to believe. I chose to love blindly. And perhaps that blindness was the most expensive debt I ever paid. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Ordinary, except for the envelope that slid under my door. The paper was thin, but the words printed on it weighed 1,000 pounds. Notice of overdue payment. Account in the name of Eleanor White. My name. Not Daniel's. Mine. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The balance due glared up at me. 47,700 Su 89, 8. The account number was unfamiliar. My heart sank as I read the fine print. The loan had been taken out 3 months earlier, signed with my name, but I had never signed anything. The room tilted. My breath came shallow, like I was drowning in air. I gripped the edge of the nightstand to steady myself. Daniel. It had to be Daniel. I sat down on the narrow bed, the letter crumpling in my fist. The world outside the window went on as usual. Children laughing in the playground across the street, a car horn blaring, a dog barking. Life moved forward, indifferent. Inside me, something collapsed. I whispered aloud, as if the walls needed to hear. He used my name. The taste of betrayal was metallic, like blood at the back of my throat. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Questions pounded against my skull, merciless and loud. If I stay silent, what will be left of me? ASE. If I stay silent, how many more debts will arrive with my name scrawled on them? DS. If I stay silent, will I lose this little room? The last corner of the world that is mine? H's. If I stay silent, am I even Eleanor anymore? Or just a number, a signature, a wallet that breathes? 2. Each question was a hammer striking the same spot in my chest, over and over. I thought of the sewing machine again. Its creak, its endless labor. For decades, I had pressed the pedal for them. Now Daniel pressed a different kind of pedal, forging my name, pushing me toward the cliff of ruin. I saw two futures. One, I continue. I pay. I endure. Until nothing is left. No savings, no dignity, no self. Two, I stop. I resist. I risk losing them forever. The first path promised slow death. The second promised pain, confrontation, maybe even loneliness. But loneliness, I already knew. The next morning, I walked down the hall to the small computer room reserved for residents. My legs shook, but I forced them forward. Each step was heavier than the last. I sat before the screen, its glow pale against my wrinkled skin. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen, canceling the monthly transfer to Daniel's account. It seemed such a small thing, a few clicks, a few keystrokes, yet I felt as though I were holding an axe above my own heart. My hand trembled as I entered the password. The keys clacked loudly in the quiet room, like gunshots. Sweat gathered at my temples. The cursor blinked, patient, unforgiving. One click. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? I stared at the words. My throat constricted. My breath hitched. Am I sure? If I wasn't, Daniel would keep draining me dry. If I wasn't, my name would keep appearing on debts I never touched. If I wasn't, there would be nothing left of Eleanor White but ashes of sacrifice. I pressed the button. The confirmation message flashed. Transfer canceled. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hands lay limp on the keyboard, my chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. Then something unexpected happened. A tear slid down my cheek, not of sorrow, but of release. The silence in the room was immense. My pulse roared in my ears. Yet beneath it all was a strange clarity, a sharpness I hadn't felt in years. I whispered to the empty room, my voice low but steady. I am not your victim anymore, Daniel. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, indifferent witnesses to my rebellion. The stakes were brutal, and I knew them. I could lose whatever fragile connection remained with my son. I could face anger, threats, even legal battles. I could die without ever hearing him call me, Mom, with love again. But the alternative, continuing to bleed for a family that had already abandoned me, was worse. It was a choice between losing them, or losing myself. And at 76, I finally realized, I would rather lose them. When I rose from the chair, my body still shook, but my spine felt straighter. My steps echoed in the hallway, sharp and certain. Something inside me had shifted. Something final. Something irreversible. That evening, as I sat by the window watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt the weight of the decision settle into me. For years, I had been the silent shadow in my own family, the background figure who gave and gave while fading away. Not anymore. I touched my chest, feeling the beat of my heart, and whispered to myself, I am no longer the quiet shadow in my family. I am the keeper of my own voice. And for the first time in decades, the words did not feel like a dream. They felt like the truth. The knock came harder than usual. Not the polite tap of a nurse. Not the gentle rhythm of a neighbor. But a sharp, pounding fist that rattled the thin door of my nursing home room. I froze with my teacup halfway to my lips. The porcelain trembled, spilling a drop onto my wrist. Mom, open up. Daniel. The voice I once longed for now carried nothing but demand. I set the cup down carefully, wiped my hand on my sweater, and shuffled to the door. My chest tightened with every step. When I opened it, Daniel was already pushing inside, his shoulders broad, his face flushed with irritation. Behind him followed Lisa, his wife. Her heels clicking against the linoleum, a leather folder clutched to her chest. The air in my room thickened instantly. My sanctuary plain walls, A single bed, the tiny wooden table with my photographs, now felt invaded, polluted. Daniel slammed the door shut with his palm. "Mom," he barked, "why the hell did you cut the transfer? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I sank into the chair by the table, forcing my body to stay calm. My hands folded neatly in my lap. "I know exactly what I did," I said, my voice even. "I stopped paying for your life." His face darkened. He slammed both hands on the table, making the teacup jump. "You can't just—" "I can," I cut in, lifting my eyes to his. "I can, because I'm still alive." The words surprised even me. They came out sharper than I intended, but they landed. Daniel blinked, his jaw tightening. Lisa stepped forward smoothly, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Eleanor, darling, you're making things harder than they need to be. We're only here to help." "Really?" She placed the leather folder on the table with a soft thud. My gaze fell on it. I already knew what it contained. Daniel leaned closer, his breath hot with frustration. "You don't understand, Mom. Bills are piling up. The house, my house, is on the line. And you know what happens if we can't keep up." I lifted my chin. "Your house is not my burden." He laughed bitterly. "Not your burden? I'm your son. Everything I have is because of you. You owe me this much." The word "Alex" cracked something inside me. Lisa slid the folder toward me, her manicured finger tapping the edge. "This is just a simple document. Power of attorney. With it, Daniel can handle everything for you. Finances, decisions, all those tedious things you shouldn't have to worry about at your age. You'll be comfortable. Safe. No stress." Her smile was polished, but her eyes were cold steel. I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I let the silence stretch, listening to the clock tick on the wall. Then I said quietly, "Comfortable for whom, Lisa? Safe for whom?" Her smile faltered. Daniel slapped the table again, louder this time. "Stop being difficult. Just sign the damn thing. It's for your own good." I looked at him. The boy I once cradled, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose field trip fee I had paid by sewing until dawn. The boy who now towered over me, demanding not love, but ownership. My hands trembled, but my voice stayed calm. "I will not sign away my life." That was the breaking point. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You're being ridiculous. Everyone does this. Do you want to end up on the street? Do you want to embarrass us all when you can't handle things?" Lisa's voice sharpened too. "If you don't sign, Eleanor, we'll have no choice but to pursue this legally. The court will see reason, even if you won't." Her words sliced the air. A threat. I felt my chest constrict, fear rising like bile. For a moment, I imagined the gavel, the courtroom, the humiliation. My hands clenched in my lap. But then, just as quickly, another thought burned through. If I give in now, I will no longer exist. Not as Eleanor, not as myself. Sicken. My gaze dropped to the folder. My fingers reached out, brushing the leather. Both of them leaned in, expectant. I opened it. The papers stared back at me, my name already typed neatly on the lines, waiting for a signature. Waiting to erase me. Daniel shoved a pen into my hand. "There. Just do it. One quick stroke and everything's handled." The pen was heavy. My grip shook. For a heartbeat, I almost surrendered. Almost. Then something surged up from deep inside me. The memory of nights at the sewing machine, of debts paid, of sacrifices forgotten. The memory of my voice whispering in the empty computer room, "I am not your victim anymore." R. My hand steadied, my jaw set, and instead of signing, I tore the papers in half. The rip echoed in the small room, raw and final. Paper shredded under my fingers, the sound sharp as thunder. Lisa gasped, recoiling as if I had struck her. Daniel's face twisted in disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared. I stood slowly, my knees weak but my back straight. The torn halves fluttered to the floor like broken wings. I am doing, I said clearly, what I should have done years ago. Daniel's fists clenched. You'll regret this. No, I replied, locking eyes with him. The only regret I carry is teaching you that my love was a bottomless well. It isn't. Lisa gathered herself, her voice icy. You think this changes anything? We'll find another way. I bent down, picked up one torn piece of paper, and held it in front of them. My hand trembled, but my voice was steady, sharp as glass. I am no longer a signature in someone else's hand. I am the final seal of my own life. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For a long moment, the room was silent except for my ragged breathing. Daniel's eyes flicked to Lisa, then back to me. Rage radiated off him. But beneath it, I saw something else. Fear. He grabbed the folder, snapped it shut, and stormed toward the door. Lisa followed, heels striking the floor like nails hammered into wood. At the doorway, Daniel spat over his shoulder. You'll regret this, Mom. You'll see. Then they were gone. The door slammed so hard the photographs on my table rattled. The room was quiet again. Too quiet. My knees buckled, and I sank back into the chair. My hands shook violently, my chest heaving. The torn papers still littered the floor, white fragments scattered like snow. I bent down, picked up one piece, and stared at the half of my name printed there. Just half. Not whole. But I smiled. For the first time in years, I smiled. Because the rest of my name, the part that mattered, was still mine. The silence around me no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like space. Space I had finally claimed for myself. The envelope was thick, the kind that carried more than bills. It arrived one gray morning, slipped under my door by a staff member who wouldn't meet my eyes. I picked it up with trembling hands. My name, Eleanor Whitish, was printed neatly on the front. The paper cut into my skin as I tore it open. Inside, notice of petition for guardianship. I read the words twice, 3 times, before they made sense. My son and his wife were petitioning the court, claiming I was incompetent, incapable of managing my own affairs. My knees buckled. I collapsed into the chair, the document slipping from my grip. Incompetent? IESEU. Unfit. They wanted to erase me, not just from their lives, but from myself. By noon, whispers had already started swirling through the nursing home. She's being sued, you know, a resident muttered in the hallway. I heard her son says she's losing her mind. Another chimed in. Their voices carried, even when they thought I couldn't hear. My hands shook so badly, I spilled tea on my nightgown. The humiliation was suffocating. It wasn't enough that my children had abandoned me. Now, they wanted the world to believe I was mad. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling blurred as tears burned my eyes. Each creak in the hallway felt like footsteps coming to take me away. I pressed my fists to my temples, whispering to myself, I'm not crazy. I'm not. I remember everything. I remember too much. But the fear was relentless. What if the court believed them? What if my voice was too small, too frail to be heard? The next morning, I took the petition and sought help. The receptionist at the front desk gave me a card. Try Mr. Harper, she said. He's handled cases like this before. Mr. Harper's office was a 20-minute cab ride away. When I walked in, I found a tall man with silver hair and a kind, weathered face. His desk was stacked with papers, but his eyes were sharp. He studied the petition in silence, then looked up at me. Eleanor, they're trying to take control of everything you own. Your bank accounts, your medical choices, even your right to decide where you live. My throat tightened. They say I'm incompetent. Harper leaned forward. Are you? I met his gaze. My voice wavered, but did not break. No, I am not. He nodded once. Then we'll fight. But Daniel and Lisa weren't idle. A week later, Harper showed me the evidence they had submitted: photocopied bank statements with forged withdrawals, a neighbor's affidavit claiming I had left the stove on 3 times in 1 month, even a fake doctor's note suggesting memory loss. My stomach twisted. This is all lies. Harper tapped the papers with his pen. I know. But the court doesn't know you. They know paper. We'll need proof to counter every word here. Proof. I thought of my old receipts, the ledger where I recorded every expense, the letters I had written to Daniel and Rebecca over the years. I still had them, tucked away in a shoebox beneath my bed. Fragments of a life lived carefully, honestly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength. Back in the nursing home, I told my roommate Agnes everything. She listened without interrupting, her gnarled hands wrapped around a chipped teacup. When I finished, she shook her head, eyes blazing. Eleanor, listen to me, she said firmly. They can forge signatures, they can lie to the court, but they can't change what you are. And you, my dear, are sharper than any knife in this place. Her words steadied me. She poured me more tea, her hand warm against mine. For a moment, the fear loosened its grip. The days that followed were a blur of tension and small comforts. Tension, Harper calling with updates. They've lined up another witness. Your son's friend. Claims you wandered outside at night. Confused. Lies stacked upon lies. Comfort. Agnes slipping me a cookie she had saved from lunch, saying with a wink, sugar helps against sorrow. Tension, a letter arriving, threatening that if I didn't cooperate, I'd be moved to a different facility for my own safety. Comfort, a kind nurse squeezing my shoulder, whispering, don't let them scare you. We know you're strong. The rhythm nearly broke me, but each small kindness was like a thread, keeping me stitched together. One evening, I sat with Harper in his office, papers spread across the desk. We'll need records, he said. Old bank statements, phone logs, anything that proves your memory and management are intact. I opened my shoebox, sliding it toward him. Inside were decades of receipts, carefully folded, electricity bills dated, tuition checks recorded, even the 12 field trip fee from 1989. Harper chuckled softly. Meticulous. This will help. Then he grew serious. Eleanor, you may face harsh questioning. They'll try to shake you, make you doubt yourself. But remember, facts are your friends, memory is your weapon. I nodded. My hands still shook, but my heart steadied. Back in my room that night, Agnes poured tea for both of us. You know, she said, truth is like this steam. She gestured to the curling vapor above the cup. It rises, no matter how heavy the air is. They can press it down, but it will find a way out. Her metaphor made me laugh, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in months. For a moment, I believed her. Yet when the lights went out and I lay in bed, fear returned like a tide. I pictured the courtroom, the judge, Daniel pointing at me, Lisa smiling her cold smile. I pictured the world nodding in agreement. She's incompetent. She's finished. CMA clenched. I pressed my palms against my eyes. What if they win? I whispered into the dark. It happened late at night, long after the halls of the nursing home had gone silent. The television in the common room hummed faintly through the walls, but most of the residents were asleep. I was heading back to my room after fetching a glass of water when I noticed something strange. On the bench outside my door lay a folder. Dark leather. Expensive. Lisa's folder. She must have dropped it earlier when she and Daniel stormed out after another argument. I bent down, my knees creaking, and lifted it. The leather was cool against my fingertips. Heavier than I expected. For a moment, I told myself to leave it closed. Return it tomorrow. Pretend I had never seen it. But curiosity, or maybe survival, pressed harder. My thumb slipped under the flap. The snap of the clasp sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hall. Inside were neatly stacked papers, each page aligned with the next. I pulled the first one free, my hands trembling. The light from the corridor lamp fell across the page. My heart stopped. It was a power of attorney. My name typed in bold at the top, a signature scrawled at the bottom. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. I traced the ink with a fingertip, cold sweat beading on my neck. The letters were too smooth, too practiced. My real signature had a tremor in the W. This one was flawless. Machine-like. The room spun. My breath came in gasps. They forged me. They dared to steal my own name. Page after page followed. Bank withdrawals with my forged signature. Medical consent forms authorizing decisions I never made. Each sheet was an execution order, stripping away pieces of my life. The paper felt icy in my hands. The ink glistened under the dim light like fresh blood. I pressed the documents against my chest, rocking slightly in the chair by my door. My pulse hammered in my ears. Whispers spilled from my lips before I could stop them. They want me erased, buried alive in legal print. Memories surged, Daniel shoving papers at me years ago, saying, "Just sign, Mom, for convenience." Lisa's cold smile as she tapped the folder on my table. My refusal. Their anger. And now this. They didn't need my hand at all. They had already stolen it. My mind reeled. I could crumble, let the shock crush me. Or, no, this was not the time to collapse. This was evidence. Proof. The weapon I had been praying for. I wiped my tears with the back of my sleeve. My hands still shook, but I forced them steady enough to refold the papers. Do not break now, Eleanor. Not now. Inside me, questions slammed like fists. How many more lies have they built on this? 6. Will the court believe the ink over my voice? Can truth still matter in a world where signatures can be stolen? The clock on the wall ticked, each second loud and heavy. I sat there, holding the folder as though it were both poison and salvation. Finally, I stood. In the dim glow of my bedside lamp, I spread the pages out across the blanket. One by one, I studied them. The more I looked, the more mistakes revealed themselves. A date written in the wrong format. A bank name misspelled. A line of handwriting too perfect, lacking the tremor of age. Flaws. Cracks in their lie. A strange calm washed over me. Fear loosened, replaced by something fiercer. I whispered into the silence. So you guys really want to bury me alive, but you left the shovel in my hands. That night, sleep never came. Instead, I packed the folder carefully, sliding it beneath my pillow as though it were treasure. My fingers curled around it, and for the first time in weeks, my heart slowed its frantic race. The truth was terrifying, but it was mine, and it was enough to fight back. Mr. Harper's office smelled of paper and dust, like a library that had forgotten how to rest. Stacks of files lined the walls, but on his desk, there was only one folder that mattered. Mine. He adjusted his glasses and said, "Eleanor, if we want to win, we need proof. Not feelings. Not memories. Proof." The word landed heavy. Proof. I nodded, my fingers tightening on the strap of my purse. Over the next days, I became a collector of fragments, gathering my life into evidence. I dug through the shoebox beneath my bed, pulling out bank statements, receipts, even old letters with dates scrawled in my handwriting. Each slip of paper was a thread, and together they wove the fabric of truth. I carried the papers to Harper's office in a grocery bag. He laid them out on his desk, arranging them with precision. "See this?" He pointed to a withdrawal Daniel had claimed I signed. "But your bank statement shows you were here, not there. It doesn't match. We built a fortress from documents. Dates became shields. Signatures became swords. It was strange, almost poetic. For years, paper had been used against me, And now, paper would defend me. But documents alone wouldn't save me. I would have to stand in that courtroom, answer questions, face Daniel and Lisa without trembling. That thought nearly broke me. Harper knew. One afternoon, he handed me a sheet of questions. "Practice," he said simply. That night, I locked my door, stood before the narrow mirror above my dresser, and began. "At your age, Mrs. White, do you sometimes forget things?" My voice shook. Sometimes, but not important things." I winced. Weak. Hesitant. I tried again. "Mrs. Tursty White, why did you stop sending money to your son?" My throat closed. I whispered, "Because he was taking advantage of me." Tears pricked my eyes. My reflection looked frail, beaten. I slammed the papers down on the dresser. "No," I muttered. "Not like this. Not again." I took a breath and started over. I lifted my chin, forcing myself to look straight into my own eyes. "My name is Eleanor White. I know exactly what I am doing." The words came clearer this time, stronger. I repeated them, again and again, until the tremor left my voice. "My name is Eleanor White. I know exactly what I am doing." Each repetition felt like hammering a nail into wood, building a foundation I could stand on. Agnes, my roommate, noticed my nightly rehearsals. One evening, she peeked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "You sound stronger," she said softly. "I have to be," I answered, taking the cup. "This time, I can't be the quiet one. Not in front of them. Not in front of a judge." She squeezed my hand. "Then don't just speak for yourself. Speak for all of us who were told our voices didn't matter." Her words lit something inside me. Maybe this wasn't just my fight. Maybe it was bigger. Harper arranged a meeting with neighbors and staff willing to testify. Mrs. Green from across the street swore she saw me balancing my checkbook every Sunday. Nurse Kelly promised to tell the court how I remembered every detail of my medication schedule. Even Agnes volunteered, saying, "If she's incompetent, then so am I." And believe me, I'm not. Their loyalty surprised me. For years, I thought I had no one. Now, as the walls closed in, I found allies pressing back against the dark. The week before court, Harper invited me to his office for one final rehearsal. He played the role of the opposing lawyer, firing questions fast, his tone sharp. "Mrs. White, isn't it true you once left the stove on?" "Yes, once. Because the phone rang, but I turned it off myself. That does not make me incompetent." "Mrs. White, how can you be trusted with finances at your age?" "Because I can show every receipt I have ever kept. Because I remember every loan I gave my son, every bill I paid. And because numbers do not lie, even when people do." Harper leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Better," he said. I exhaled, wiping sweat from my palms. That night, back in my room, I stood before the mirror one last time. The woman staring back at me was still old, still wrinkled, still weary. But her eyes no longer darted away. I said aloud, clear and steady, "My name is Eleanor White. I know exactly what I am doing." The sentence no longer felt like a rehearsal. It felt like truth. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just preparing for court. I was reclaiming myself. As I gathered the papers into a neat pile, sliding them into a folder, the metaphor struck me. This was my sword, my shield, my armor. Each document sharpened like steel, each fact polished like a blade. I was no longer defenseless. I was armed. The night before the hearing, I lay awake but calm. For once, the silence didn't feel like fear. It felt like the pause before a drumbeat. The pause before battle. I whispered into the dark, not a plea, but a promise. I am not only protecting money. I am protecting memory and dignity. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in spirit. Gray walls. Wooden benches polished smooth by years of waiting bodies. the judge's bench looming high, draped in authority, the black robe like a shadow stretching across the room. Every sound seemed magnified: the shuffle of papers, the creak of wooden chairs, the cough of a stranger behind me. Even the clock ticking on the wall struck like a hammer. This was no longer a private family quarrel. This was a battlefield. Daniel stood on the opposite side of the room, his suit pressed, his hair slicked back as though neatness could disguise deceit. Lisa sat beside him, lips pursed, hands folded over a fresh leather folder. They looked polished, professional, righteous. I sat with Mr. Harper, my lawyer. His silver hair caught the light, his posture calm but unyielding. I clutched the folder we had built together, my receipts, my bank statements, my ledger of years, my armor. When the bailiff announced the case, my knees trembled, but I forced myself to stand straighter. Daniel spoke first. His voice was firm, confident, even tender at times. He told the court, I was confused, forgetful, incapable of handling my own finances. He spoke of concern and protection, his words laced with false care. My mother is 76, he said, turning to the judge. We love her, but she doesn't always remember. She forgets bills. She confuses dates. We only want what's best for her. Granting us guardianship ensures she will be safe. Safe. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. Harper rose calmly. Your Honor, with respect, what they call protection is in fact control, and we will show that Mrs. White is entirely capable, and that the petitioners have fabricated evidence to strip her of her freedom. His voice carried steady confidence. My heartbeat slowed slightly. The battle had begun. The prosecution called their first witness, a neighbor from my old street. She claimed she once saw smoke from my kitchen window and found me confused, the stove still burning. I clenched my fists. That had been one accident, years ago, when the phone rang while soup simmered. I had turned it off myself. But now, twisted into a tale of incompetence. Harper leaned toward me. Don't worry. Watch. On cross-examination, he asked gently, What day was that, ma'am? The woman hesitated. Early spring, maybe? Are you certain? Well, I think so. Harper handed her a weather report printout. On the day you claimed, the temperature was below freezing. There would have been no open windows for you to smell smoke. The woman faltered, her eyes darting to Daniel. A small crack appeared in their case. Next came a doctor's note, presented by Lisa. It suggested mild cognitive decline. Harper stood, holding up the paper. Your Honor, notice the date in the top corner, February 30th. He let the silence hang. The courtroom stirred. There is no February 30th. Lisa's face flushed. The judge scribbled notes. Another crack. Then it was our turn. Harper called a pharmacist, who testified. I remembered every prescription detail, never missing a refill. He called Mrs. Green, my old neighbor, who said, Every Sunday, Eleanor sat by the window with her checkbook. I used to tease her for being more organized than me. Agnes, dear Agnes, walked to the stand with her cane. She leaned on it but spoke clearly. I share a room with Eleanor. She remembers everything. The nurses' schedules, even what day meatloaf is served. If she's incompetent, then I must be a genius. The courtroom chuckled softly. For the first time that day, I smiled. But then came the hardest moment. Daniel himself took the stand. My son, my boy. He looked at me briefly before facing the judge. His voice softened, rehearsed to sound sincere. My mother was a wonderful parent. But lately, she struggles. She called me 3 times in 1 week, asking the same question about a bill. She forgets where she puts things. We're worried she'll be taken advantage of if we don't step in. Each word was a dagger. The tone gentle, pitying, made me want to scream. Not because it was true, but because it was deliberate betrayal. I looked at him, willing him to meet my eyes. But he didn't. He stared past me, as if I were already gone. My chest ached. Still, I sat tall. Finally, it was my turn. The bailiff guided me to the stand. My hands trembled as I swore the oath. The wooden chair felt too hard, the lights too bright. At first, my voice wavered. The opposing lawyer asked questions meant to rattle me. "Mrs. White, do you sometimes forget where you place your keys?" "Yes," I admitted. "But so do you, I imagine." Laughter rippled in the gallery. "Mrs. White, have you ever left a bill unpaid?" "Once," I said firmly. 30 years ago, during a postal strike. I paid it the next day. My confidence grew. My voice steadied. Then I turned to the judge. "Your Honor," I began, "I am old. My hair is white. My hands are wrinkled, and sometimes my bones ache in the morning. But I am not incompetent." I drew in a breath, my heart pounding. For 50 years, I sewed clothes to raise my children. I worked 12, 14 hours a day. I paid tuition, debts, even weddings. I remember every dollar, every sacrifice, every night I stayed awake worrying. Do not tell me I cannot remember. My memory is sharper than the ink they forged to erase me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I pressed on. "I do not deny my age. But age is not incompetence. Age is survival. Age is wisdom. And I will not let my children, my own flesh, turn my survival into weakness, just so they can own what is not theirs." I leaned forward, my voice cutting through the hush. "I am no longer a story invented by others. I am the author of my own ending." Silence followed. Heavy, electric. For once, everyone looked at me, not as a frail old woman, but as a person standing her ground. The judge cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mrs. White." He reviewed the evidence once more. The flawed doctor's note, the forged signatures, the false testimonies. His gavel struck the block, sharp as thunder. "The court finds insufficient evidence of incompetence. Guardianship is denied. Mrs. Eleanor White retains full control of her affairs." The words washed over me like sunlight breaking storm clouds. Harper squeezed my shoulder. Agnes dabbed her eyes in the gallery. Daniel's jaw tightened, his fists clenched. Lisa whispered furiously in his ear. But their voices no longer mattered. Relief crashed into me like a wave. My body sagged, shoulders trembling. Tears blurred my vision. But they tasted different. Salty, yes, but with sweetness at last. I stepped down from the stand, my steps shaky but free. Through the tall windows, sunlight streamed in, touching my face with warmth I hadn't felt in months. For the first time in years, I smiled without fear. The battle was over. And I had won. The courtroom noise still rang in my ears as I returned to the nursing home. The shuffle of shoes, the crack of the gavel, the murmurs of strangers. They followed me like ghosts, even as the cab wound its way through familiar streets. When I opened the door to my room, the silence was crushing. My bed sat neatly made, the photographs still in their frames, the small lamp casting its usual golden glow. Nothing had changed here. Yet everything in me had. I set my purse down and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in months, no one could take anything from me. The judge had spoken. The law was on my side. My life was still mine. But my chest ached. That night I could not sleep. The sheets twisted around my legs. Tears slid down my cheeks, unbidden, soaking the pillow. I whispered into the darkness, as though confessing to the walls. I won, but I wish I had never needed to fight my own children in court. The words broke something open in me. Victory was supposed to be sweet, but it stung. It stung because the people who should have celebrated with me were the very ones who had tried to destroy me. In the hallway, I could hear the gentle snores of Agnes. She had promised to stay up with me, but exhaustion had claimed her. I was glad. She didn't need to see me like this. Curled up, old bones shaking, clutching a victory that felt heavier than defeat. The clock ticked on the wall. Each second was steady, indifferent. Outside the window, the night pressed close, thick with silence. I closed my eyes, remembering Daniel's face on the witness stand. Calm, cold, looking right through me as if I were a stranger. That memory hurt worse than any lie he had told. Yet beneath the sorrow, something else stirred. A lightness. I no longer owed him. I no longer owed anyone. The weight of decades, the endless giving, the silent endurance, the fear of speaking out, had cracked open. My tears were no longer only grief. They were release. I pressed my palm flat against my chest and whispered again, "It's over. It's finally over." The next morning, I woke early. Dawn crept in through the blinds, painting the walls in pale gold. My body was tired, but my spirit felt different. I shuffled to the kitchenette, brewed myself a cup of tea, and carried it to the small window. Steam rose, curling in the light. I wrapped both hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into me. Outside, the garden was quiet. Dew glistened on the grass. A robin hopped along the fence. Simple, ordinary things. But they looked new, as though the world itself had shifted color overnight. I opened the window and let the cool air wash over me. It smelled of damp earth and faint blossoms. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to visit, or for someone to call. I wasn't waiting for approval or permission. I was simply here, alive. Later that day, Agnes joined me. She tapped her cane against the floor, settling into the chair beside mine. "You look lighter," she said, studying me with wise eyes. I smiled faintly. "Do I?" She nodded. "Like someone put down a heavy bag. Maybe not happy yet, but freer." Her words fit perfectly. Still, the ache remained. Freedom had come at a cost I would never stop counting. I had saved myself, but I had lost my son. Some wounds never heal. They only stop bleeding. That night, as I prepared for bed, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Wrinkled skin, tired eyes, but behind them, a spark. A spark I had thought was gone. I raised my chin, whispering not to the mirror, but to myself. "You are still Eleanor White. You are still here." I climbed into bed, the sheets cool against my skin. The room was quiet, but no longer suffocating. I let my eyelids close. My breathing slowed. This time, the tears that came were softer. Not sharp with pain, but gentle, like rain after drought. I thought of the judge's gavel. The words of finality. "Mrs. Eleanor White retains full control of her affairs." They echoed in me, not as a sentence, but as a song. The morning sun spilled gently across the floor of my new apartment. It was small, just 2 rooms and a balcony. But it was mine. The walls smelled faintly of fresh paint, the kind of smell that spoke of beginnings rather than endings. I walked barefoot across the wooden floor, a cup of coffee warming my hands. The cup was light, feather-light, nothing like the heavy silence I used to cradle in the nursing home. I pushed open the balcony doors. A rush of air greeted me, soft and alive. The city stirred below, voices, footsteps, the whistle of a vendor cart. I leaned against the railing, coffee close to my lips, and whispered, "This is freedom." It wasn't grand, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. After the trial, I sold the old house. The walls of that place held too many echoes of nights spent sewing, of children who had grown but never truly stayed. The money went into savings, and from that savings, I bought something I had dreamed of since I was a girl: a ticket to Italy. Italy, land of fashion, of stitches finer than thread, of cathedrals rising like dreams. I arrived in Florence on a spring morning. The streets smelled of espresso and bread. Tourists thronged the piazzas, cameras clicking, but I walked slowly, savoring each cobblestone beneath my shoes. I visited the Duomo, craning my neck until it ached, marveling at how something so heavy could still lift the soul. I sat in a cafe, dipping biscotti into cappuccino, my heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in decades, I wasn't working for anyone. I wasn't paying anyone's debt. I wasn't waiting for anyone's call. I was simply Eleanor. When I returned home, I joined a community center nearby. They ran a small program for orphans and underprivileged children. One afternoon, I noticed a corner where a battered sewing machine sat unused. I touched it, and the memory of my old singer flooded back. The creak of the pedal, the ache in my ankles, the sacrifices stitched into every garment. Once, that sound had been my prison. Now, it could be something else. So, I offered to teach. Every Tuesday afternoon, a handful of children gathered around. Their eyes lit up when the needle pierced fabric, when cloth turned into shape beneath their hands. They laughed at their crooked stitches, and I laughed with them. The machine no longer chained me. It connected me. The rhythm of the pedal was no longer burden, but music. At night, I often thought of the past. I remembered the heaviness of that first envelope, the sting of Daniel's words, the humiliation of court. The wounds were still there, but they no longer defined me. Pain had once been my identity. Now, it was simply part of my story. I wrote in a small notebook each evening, not long essays, just fragments. Today, Anna made her first straight seam. She beamed like she had discovered gold. The air smelled of rain. I let it in. It felt like forgiveness. I am 77, and I am still learning. The notebook was not for anyone else. It was my quiet testimony that I had lived, endured, and reclaimed myself. Sometimes, people ask me if Daniel or Rebecca ever came back. The truth? They didn't. And I don't wait for them anymore. Their absence used to feel like an open wound. Now, it feels like scar tissue sensitive, yes, but no longer bleeding. I don't need their apology to move forward. Their silence is their burden. My freedom is mine. One afternoon, standing on the balcony, I thought of the contrast. Once, I sat in a nursing home, staring at a blank whiteboard, my name underlined with nothing. No visitors. No family. Only silence. That emptiness had felt heavier than death. Now, I stood with a coffee cup light in my hand, listening to the chatter of life below. My calendar filled not with family visits, but with classes I chose, trips I planned, friendships I nurtured. The circle had closed, but I had changed within it. I am not naive. I know loneliness will visit me again. I know age will keep pressing. My body is still old, my steps slower, but my spirit is not bent. If anything, it is straighter now than it has ever been. Because I finally understood, love without boundaries is not love, it is erasure. And self-respect is not selfishness, it is survival. I don't preach this lesson to anyone. I don't write it on posters or shout it from rooftops. Instead, I live it quietly, with every stitch I show the children, with every step I take into places once closed to me. One evening, after class, I lingered in the empty room. The sewing machine sat silent. I rested my hand on it, smiling. "Thank you," I whispered, not to the machine, but to myself. To the woman who had once endured. To the woman who had finally chosen. The creak of the pedal was gone. The burden was gone. All that remained was freedom. Now, when I walk through the city, I don't feel like a forgotten shadow. I stop at markets, chat with strangers, taste food I never allowed myself before. My laughter surprises me sometimes. It bursts out, unplanned, unashamed. The world has not grown kinder, but I have grown stronger. On the morning of my 78th birthday, I took a train to the coast. I stood barefoot on the sand, the waves rushing up to kiss my ankles. The horizon stretched wide, endless. I breathed in salt and wind, eyes stinging with joy. and I whispered the words that now defined me. I am no longer left behind in a nursing home. I am the one opening the door to my own life. The sea answered with a roar, and I laughed. The sound carried away on the wind. If you are still here, if your eyes are on these words, it means you have walked this entire road with me. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the voice of a woman who once believed she had no voice at all. My name is Eleanor White. I am 76 years old. I am a mother who was once erased by her own family's silence, who was nearly buried by forged papers and legal lies. But I am also a woman who stood up, trembling at first, and then firm, until my voice carried through a courtroom. I was not supposed to survive that fight. And yet, I did. Now I turn to you. What would you do if one day your own blood tried to erase your name with nothing more than a signature you never wrote? Would you stay silent, hoping it would pass? Or would you rise, even if your knees shook, and say, "No more"? It is not an easy question. I know. Because for most of my life, I stayed silent. Silence was my prison. But silence never protected me. If my story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a wound you carry, or gave you courage you didn't know you had, I ask for just one thing. Leave a comment. Tell me what you would choose. Or tell me your own story. I want to hear it. Share this with someone who might be standing at the edge of the same choice, someone trembling as I once did. Your share might be the hand that steadies them. And if you wish to walk further with me, follow along. Each week, I tell another true journey. Of loss, yes, but also of how we learn to stand again. Because none of us should face the silence alone. I have learned something simple but fierce. Love without boundaries is not love. It is exploitation. And the act of saying no is not cruelty. It is survival. I will not lecture you or preach. I will only show you what my life has shown me. That freedom is built, not given. That dignity is a seed you must guard, even from those who claim to love you most. And that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is hold your own key, even if it means closing a door behind you. So let me leave you with this. I am no longer waiting by a whiteboard for a name that never appears. I am no longer the quiet shadow in a courtroom where others tried to define me. Teachers and all well. Eaches, I am no longer a shadow in a nursing home. I am the keeper of the key to my freedom. And if I can find that strength at 76, maybe you can find yours too.